Putin Bad News Putin's kidnapped children should not be forgotten. Months of secret talks between Qatar and Russia resulted in an agreement to return 4 Ukrainian children to their families after they had been taken to Russia by Russian forces during their full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Of course, we should rejoice over every child who is found and returned to his or her family, but we shouldn't be fooled by Kremlin photo ops. Vladimir Putin is using this tactic to portray the Russian government as reasonable and open to compromise. Forewarning Western journalists about forthcoming well-funded efforts to whitewash Russia's ghoulishly titled children's rights ombudswoman, Maria Lvova-Belova, who is accused by the International Criminal Court's prosecutor of deporting Ukrainian children to Russia, the Ukrainian Center for National Resistance issued the warning 2 weeks ago. While we rejoice in the safe return of these 4 children, we must not lose sight of the other 20,000 that Kiev claims Russia is holding captive, children taken from the destroyed cities and towns of East Ukraine, as well as orphanages and institutions for children with mental and/or physical disabilities. Some lost contact with their parents during the conflict, while others lost both sets of parents to the Russian invasion. Others, dubbed children of the state, were either born without parents or had no relatives who could provide for them. Some Ukrainian parents have made terrifying trips into Russia, through filtration camps and war zones, to retrieve their children. Despite the emotional pull of imagining a child's face when a parent or grandparent comes to wake them from a nightmare, the Ukrainian government reports that only 400 children have been returned in this way. Instead, we must face facts and imagine the despair a child must feel to know they are all alone in a hostile environment that seeks to destroy their home and community, with no one coming to rescue them. If kids stay in Russia for an extended period of time, they may change their names and erase their records, making them impossible to find. In the case of those still living with their biological families, they are given new identities and told that their biological families no longer want them because Russia has saved them from the cruel Ukrainians. Children from Ukraine are placed with Russian families who have registered with the government and are offered up to $1,000 in exchange for their child acquiring Russian citizenship. The Russian government also provides specialized summer camps and schools for kidnapped and captured children in occupied territories. The patriotic education classes use crude Putinite propaganda to teach the kids to hate Russia. Some of the schools are protected by armed Russian Cossacks, who have been accused of child abuse. Once the Russians have successfully manipulated the children, they use them for propaganda purposes. Maria Lvova-Belova, the head Russian child snatcher, has bragged about brainwashing orphans from Mariupol. When asked why these kids were singing the Ukrainian national anthem while in Russian captivity, she told Russian state television that it was because they had been taught to do so. However, after being subjected to months of experimental psychological pressure, they eventually caved and professed their undying love for Russia. There is a good chance that many children who have been traumatized by Russian bombs, shells, and torture will be institutionalized as mentally delayed in Russia. It was clear to me during my time volunteering at an orphanage in the Pskov region of Russia that many of the children there did not have mental disabilities, but rather mental health difficulties that were understandable given their circumstances. Soviet influence meant that child psychiatrists saw healthy responses to abuse and neglect as abnormalities that normal society needed to protect itself from. Like their Russian counterparts, Ukrainian children incarcerated in such dreary institutions will be looked after by underpaid and uncaring governesses who provide them with neither their own toys nor clothing. Because of the severity of their injuries, they may spend months, if not years, in a specialized care facility. Among the children I knew, those with the most severe illnesses were sent to a cruel institution called Bogdanovo, literally, place given by God, where they were drugged and chained to beds. Not all of the kids who went into Bogdanovo made it out alive. Hundreds of Ukrainian children held in Russian custody face this future today. Deportations are also still happening. 300 kids from the occupied Zaporizhia region reportedly enrolled in a Russian school program not too long ago. In the past, children who were sent on expeditions never came back. Concurrent with the announcement of this trip, parents in occupied Zaporizhia were given until the end of October to coerce their children into becoming Russian citizens or risk having them taken from them. The time has come when parents must make a decision between their country and their children's future. It's a no-brainer, but parents in an unoccupied part of Ukraine don't have to make that decision. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine is ongoing. People who are otherwise well-disposed turn away because they are unable to take in the tragedy. The calls to put pressure on Ukraine to give up territory are an understandable attempt to put an end to the suffering. The terror would continue regardless. Calls to hand over territory to the Russians ignore the fact that doing so means handing over more terrified children who know nobody can find them.